Chapter 1. Origins in South Africa. Elon Musk was born on June 28, 1971, in Pretoria, South Africa. The world he entered was complicated, divided, and turbulent. Apartheid still gripped the nation. For most families, life was defined by strict racial laws and political unrest. But for Elon's family, it was also defined by curiosity, ambition, and a sense of being slightly out of place. His father, Elon Musk, was an engineer. Intelligent, resourceful, and hands-on, Errol exposed Elon early to the world of machines and problem-solving. His mother, May Musk, was a dietitian and model. Independent and adventurous, she balanced beauty with resilience, raising 3 children in a household that was anything but ordinary. From the very beginning, Elon was different. Not rebellious in the typical sense, but deeply inward, lost in thought, often found staring into space, pondering things too big for a child his age. Teachers noticed his quietness, sometimes mistaking it for shyness. But really, he was thinking. Always thinking. At home, he buried himself in books, science fiction, encyclopedias, fantasy novels, anything he could get his hands on. He devoured The Lord of the Rings, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and the Encyclopedia Britannica. If he found a new book, he would often finish it in just a couple of days. Reading wasn't just entertainment for him. It was a doorway into entire universes. And yet, outside of those books, childhood wasn't easy. Elon was bullied. In South Africa at the time, schools could be harsh environments, and Elon, small, quiet, and often daydreaming, became a target. He was beaten badly on more than one occasion, even hospitalized once after a group of boys pushed him down a flight of stairs. The pain and isolation left scars, but they also strengthened his resolve. He learned to retreat into his mind, into his ideas, into the worlds he could build for himself. Technology became his refuge. By the age of 10, Elon had discovered computers. His parents bought him a Commodore VIC-20, a primitive machine by today's standards, but for him it was magical. He taught himself programming. Within a couple of years, he built a video game called Blastar, a simple space shooter. He sold the code to a magazine for around $500. It was a small victory, but it showed him that his imagination could be turned into something tangible, something people valued. His childhood wasn't only computers. He dreamed of far-off worlds, rockets, planets, galaxies. He imagined himself among the stars. South Africa, in many ways, felt too small for his ambitions. The political system, the limitations, the sense of being boxed in. He wanted out. He dreamed of America, the land of opportunity, the place where great inventors and entrepreneurs seemed to rise. But for the moment, he was still a boy in Pretoria, bouncing between books, computers, and the occasional clash with the world around him. What shaped him most wasn't comfort, but discomfort. Not ease, but difficulty. A restless drive to escape. Even as a teenager, Elon began forming the traits that would later define his life. Obsessive focus, resilience in the face of rejection, and an almost reckless willingness to chase big, impossible dreams. The South Africa of Elon's youth was a place of division, yet in his own mind, he was already building bridges to other worlds. He had the spark of a question that would follow him for the rest of his life. What's the best way to change the future? And so, Elon Musk's journey began, in a small, often harsh corner of the world, with a boy who read too much, dreamed too much, and refused to let the limits around him define the limits inside him. Chapter 2. A curious young inventor. As Elon entered his teenage years, the traits that had always set him apart only grew stronger. He wasn't just a kid who liked computers. He was obsessed with them. While other teenagers spent their afternoons hanging out, Elon sat hunched over keyboards, typing furiously, teaching himself how machines worked. He was the kind of person who, once he discovered a subject, had to consume everything about it. Whether it was programming, physics, or engineering, he didn't dabble. He dove headfirst. His hunger for knowledge wasn't casual, it was all-consuming. But South Africa in the 1980s wasn't exactly a hotbed of technological innovation. Computers were rare, the internet barely existed, and opportunities were limited. Elon found himself isolated again, not only socially, but intellectually. He had big ideas, but few places to express them. At school, he did well academically, but he didn't shine in the way teachers usually expected. He wasn't trying to impress them, he was trying to understand the world. And that kind of curiosity doesn't fit neatly into a classroom box. Still, He carried on. He learned from books, from experiments, from trial and error. He and his brother, Kimball, often tinkered together, exploring ideas, dreaming of what might be possible outside the borders of their country. There was also a growing sense of frustration. South Africa was still under apartheid, still locked in political turmoil. The country's mandatory military service loomed ahead of him, and Elon wanted no part of it. He didn't agree with the system, and he certainly didn't want to be forced into upholding it. So, even as a teenager, he started looking for a way out. He knew the United States was where he wanted to end up, the center of technology, the land of invention. But first, he looked to Canada. His mother had been born there, and through her, he could secure Canadian citizenship. That, he realized, would be his ticket out. In 1988, at just 17 years old, Elon made a bold decision. With little more than determination and a handful of belongings, he left South Africa for Canada. He had no clear plan, no safety net. But he had a conviction. He had to leave in order to build the future he wanted. The move wasn't easy. Life in Canada was nothing glamorous. He took odd jobs just to get by, working on farms, cutting wood, cleaning boilers in a lumber mill. The work was grueling, dirty, and exhausting. But Elon didn't complain. He did what he needed to do to survive. For him, this was only a temporary step, a bridge towards something bigger. He enrolled at Queen's University in Ontario, eager to begin a new chapter. There, he finally found an environment where his curiosity could expand more freely. At Queen's, Elon began to connect with people who shared his ambitions. Among them was a young woman named Justine Wilson, who would later become his first wife. But Elon wasn't destined to stay in Ontario for long. After 2 years, he transferred to the University of Pennsylvania in the United States, the place he'd dreamed of since childhood. At Penn, he studied both physics and economics, a combination that might seem unusual at first. But for Elon, it made perfect sense. Physics gave him the tools to understand how the universe worked. Economics gave him the tools to understand how people and markets worked. Together, they formed the foundation of how he would later approach everything in his career, solving problems at the intersection of science and business. At Penn, Elon began to shine in ways that hinted at what was to come. He wasn't just a student buried in textbooks. He was a thinker, a dreamer, and slowly, a doer. He and Kimball rented a large house off campus and turned it into a kind of unofficial nightclub to help cover rent. It was scrappy, creative, and entrepreneurial, a small taste of what would later become his style, taking risks, trying things, and pushing boundaries. Still, the most important part of these years wasn't the money he scraped together or the parties he helped host. It was the sense of possibility. Elon felt closer than ever to the future he imagined. He saw the internet emerging, and with it, an entirely new frontier. He realized that computers wouldn't just be tools for hobbyists. They would shape industries, economies, even entire civilizations. By the time Elon graduated, his sense of mission was taking shape. He believed the internet, renewable energy, and space exploration were the 3 arenas that would define the future of humanity. And he wanted to be part of all 3. He wasn't sure exactly how it would happen, but he knew it had to happen. For Elon Musk, the years of struggle, of being bullied, of leaving his homeland, of scraping by in Canada, all led to this point. He had arrived in America, he had knowledge, he had ambition, and most of all, he had a relentless drive. The young boy who once sold a video game for $500 was about to enter the world of high-stakes entrepreneurship. And the world was about to meet Elon Musk, not just as a student or dreamer, but as a builder of companies, a challenger of industries, and a man determined to leave his mark on history. Chapter 3: Leaving Home for America. By the mid-1990s, Elon Musk had finished his time at the University of Pennsylvania. He graduated with degrees in both physics and economics, 2 fields that gave him both the language of the universe and the language of commerce. But Elon wasn't interested in following a traditional path. He wasn't aiming for Wall Street or academia. He wanted to build. After graduation, Elon briefly started a PhD program in applied physics at Stanford University. But almost as soon as it began, he saw what was happening outside the walls of academia. The internet was exploding. New companies were popping up almost overnight. People with bold ideas and sometimes very little experience were creating businesses that reshaped industries. Elon looked at Stanford, then looked at Silicon Valley, and he made a decision. 2 days into the PhD program, he dropped out. He would chase the internet boom instead. His first real company was called Zip2. Along with his brother Kimball, Elon set out to create a kind of online business directory. Think of it as a digital map and phone book rolled together, with extra features that allowed newspapers and businesses to integrate maps into their services. It may sound simple now, but in the mid-1990s, it was revolutionary. Of course, in the beginning, it was anything but glamorous. Elon and Kimball rented a small office. They couldn't afford much, so they slept on the floor. They showered at a local YMCA. Elon would code for days at a time, often skipping meals, surviving on caffeine, living inside the machine he was building. They pitched their idea to investors, and slowly, Zip2 began to gain traction. But working with investors wasn't easy. Elon was young, unproven, and obsessed with control. Venture capitalists wanted to shape the company, to bring in experienced managers. Elon clashed with them, often pushing back hard. It was his company, his vision. But in the world of startups, compromise was unavoidable. Eventually, Zip2 landed big deals with newspapers like the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune. Suddenly, the scrappy little startup was worth something. And in 1999, it was acquired by Compaq for over $300 million. Elon's share was around 22 million. For most people, that would have been a life-changing moment, a chance to relax, enjoy success, maybe retire early. But not for Elon. For him, the sale of Zip2 wasn't an end. It was a beginning. With his new wealth, Elon immediately looked for his next big opportunity, and he found it in online finance. At the time, sending money online was clunky and slow. Elon envisioned a future where financial transactions could happen seamlessly over the internet. So he founded a company called X.com, an online bank that aimed to transform how people handled money. It was a bold idea, maybe even too bold for its time. Banks were skeptical, customers were hesitant, but Elon pressed forward, convinced that digital finance was the future. X.com eventually merged with another startup called Confinity, which had built a money transfer system known as PayPal. The merger created a powerful new platform, one that combined Elon's vision with Confinity's technology. But once again, Elon clashed with leadership. He wanted to push big, risky changes, while others urged caution. Eventually, the board voted to replace him as CEO. It was a painful blow. Imagine creating something world-changing, only to be pushed aside. But Elon still held a large stake in the company. And in 2002, eBay acquired PayPal for $1.5 billion. Elon walked away with around $180 million. Now, Elon Musk was wealthy beyond anything he had known before. But he wasn't interested in yachts or vacations. He had 3 missions in mind, the same ones that had been simmering since his university days: the internet, renewable energy, and space exploration. He had already made his mark on the internet. The next frontiers were energy and space. In the early 2000s, few people were seriously talking about commercial space exploration. Space was the domain of governments, not entrepreneurs. Rockets were expensive, failure rates were high, and the risks were enormous. But Elon couldn't let go of the idea. He believed humanity needed to become a multi-planetary species. Staying on Earth forever, he argued, was a recipe for eventual extinction. So he began researching rockets. He traveled to Russia to see if he could buy old intercontinental ballistic missiles to repurpose for space launches. But the meetings didn't go well. The Russians laughed him out of the room. They didn't take him seriously. Instead of giving up, Elon came back to America with an even bigger idea. He would build his own rockets. From scratch, at a fraction of the cost. Friends told him it was crazy. Industry veterans told him it was impossible. But Elon believed he could do it by rethinking the process, by questioning every assumption that made rockets so expensive. And so, in 2002, with much of his PayPal fortune on the line, he founded Space Exploration Technologies, better known as SpaceX. It was a gamble unlike anything he had ever attempted. The risks were enormous. Failure was not just possible, it was almost certain. But Elon Musk had never been afraid of risk. The boy who once dreamed of escaping South Africa had now positioned himself to try and escape Earth itself. What followed was one of the most grueling and dramatic chapters of his entire life. Chapter 4: Reaching for the Stars. In 2002, Elon Musk took one of the biggest gambles of his life. He poured more than $100 million of his own money into a dream that most experts thought was ridiculous: to build a private rocket company that could send payloads, and eventually people, into space. He called it Space Exploration Technologies. The world would come to know it simply as SpaceX. The idea was simple in words, but staggering in practice. Make spaceflight dramatically cheaper by rethinking the way rockets were built. Governments and contractors like Boeing and Lockheed Martin spent hundreds of millions of dollars on single launches. Elon believed he could do it for a fraction of the price. But there was one problem. Elon wasn't a rocket scientist. He didn't have decades of aerospace experience. What he had was relentless curiosity and a refusal to accept impossible as an answer. So, he did what he always did when facing the unknown. He taught himself. He devoured textbooks on rocketry. He peppered engineers with endless questions. He pushed until he understood every detail. He began recruiting some of the brightest young engineers in the world. Many of them were drawn not by salaries, which were modest compared to big aerospace firms, but by the sheer audacity of the mission. They wanted to work on something that mattered. The company set up shop in Hawthorne, California, inside an old Boeing warehouse. The early atmosphere was scrappy and intense. Long hours, constant testing, sleepless nights. Elon demanded everything from his team, and even more from himself. He wasn't a distant CEO. He was in the trenches, challenging designs, rewriting processes, asking the impossible. Their first rocket was called the Falcon 1, a small two-stage vehicle designed to carry lightweight payloads into orbit. It was named, of course, after the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. Elon had always loved science fiction, but now he was trying to turn it into science fact. But rockets are unforgiving. They don't care about ambition or dreams. They care about physics. And the physics is brutal. The first Falcon 1 launch in 2006 ended in failure. Just seconds after liftoff, the rocket crashed into the ocean. Millions of dollars, years of work, gone in an instant. Elon and his team went back to work, determined to fix the problems. 2 years later, in 2007, they tried again. This time, the rocket made it further, but it still failed to reach orbit. Undeterred, SpaceX pressed on. In 2008, they attempted a third launch. The rocket soared upward, and for a brief moment, it seemed success was finally in reach. But during stage separation, a technical malfunction caused it to spin out of control. The rocket was lost. 3 launches, 3 failures. By this point, Elon had poured nearly all of his PayPal fortune into SpaceX. The company was bleeding money. Morale was collapsing. Employees feared they were finished. Investors were nervous. Even friends urged Elon to quit. But Elon Musk refused. He told his team they had one more chance. A 4th launch. If it failed, SpaceX would be dead. But if it succeeded, it might just survive. In September of 2008, on a tiny island in the Pacific Ocean called Omelek, SpaceX prepared for that 4th attempt. The pressure was immense. Elon had sunk everything into this moment. His money, his reputation, his very identity. If the rocket failed, it wouldn't just end SpaceX. It might end Elon's career. The Falcon 1 lifted off. It roared upward, climbing higher, faster, steadier than before. Stage separation succeeded. The second stage ignited. The minutes ticked by. And then, for the first time in history, a privately developed liquid-fueled rocket reached orbit. Against all odds, SpaceX had done it. The victory came at the last possible moment. Within weeks, the company received a critical contract from NASA, a deal worth over $1 billion to deliver cargo to the International Space Station. That contract saved SpaceX. Without it, the company would have folded. 2008 was also brutal in another way. Tesla, Elon's electric car company, was on the brink of collapse at the very same time. The financial crisis had dried up funding. Cars were delayed, costs were skyrocketing, and bankruptcy loomed. Elon was caught in a storm on 2 fronts: a rocket company that had nearly died, and a car company that seemed destined to follow. He had to make an excruciating choice with his remaining money. Save SpaceX or save Tesla? He chose both. He split his last reserves between the two, risking total ruin. It was a move that, by all logic, should have ended in disaster. But fate, timing, and sheer stubbornness kept him alive. The NASA contract secured SpaceX. Emergency funding scraped Tesla through its darkest hour. By the end of that year, Elon Musk stood battered but not broken. He had stared down failure after failure, bankruptcy after bankruptcy, humiliation after humiliation. And somehow, he was still standing. The world began to take notice. This wasn't just another rich entrepreneur dabbling in rockets and cars. This was someone willing to gamble everything, to endure everything, to drag impossible visions into reality. And for Elon Musk, the journey was only just beginning. Chapter 5, Tesla's rise from the ashes. While SpaceX was battling to survive, another of Elon Musk's ventures was locked in its own life-or-death struggle, Tesla Motors. The idea of building a successful electric car company in the early 2000s seemed almost laughable. Electric cars had been tried before, but they were slow, expensive, and limited. The mainstream auto industry dismissed them as impractical toys. Gasoline was king. But Elon believed otherwise. He believed the future of transportation had to be electric, not just for performance, but for survival. If humanity was to avoid environmental catastrophe, we had to transition away from fossil fuels. Tesla was not Elon's original idea. The company was founded in 2003 by engineers Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning. They had the vision, but they needed capital. Elon became the primary investor in 2004, pouring in millions and becoming chairman of the board. Soon, he was deeply involved, not just funding the company, but driving its direction. The first car Tesla built was the Roadster, an electric sports car based on the Lotus Elise. Unlike the clunky electric cars of the past, the Roadster was sleek, fast, and exciting. It could go from 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds. It shattered the stereotype that electric cars were boring, but building it was a nightmare. Costs ballooned, production delays mounted. Elon pushed relentlessly, demanding the highest standards. Engineers and designers worked grueling hours, trying to solve problem after problem. And all the while, money was running out. By 2008, Tesla was on the brink of bankruptcy. The global financial crisis had dried up funding. Investors pulled back. The company had only weeks of cash left. Employees feared the end. Elon himself was nearly broke. He had already sunk most of his PayPal fortune into SpaceX and Tesla. The fourth SpaceX launch had just barely saved the rocket company. Now, Tesla teetered on the edge. In those final days, Elon made one of the riskiest decisions of his life. He took the last of his remaining cash, money he needed to pay his own bills, to support his family, and poured it into Tesla. It wasn't enough by itself, but it kept the company alive just long enough. At the very last moment, on Christmas Eve of 2008, investors agreed to a crucial funding round. Tesla survived by a thread. Elon later described it as one of the worst times of his life. Personally, he was going through a painful divorce. Professionally, he was ridiculed by the press. Headlines called Tesla a joke. Analysts predicted its collapse. SpaceX was mocked as a vanity project. He was, in many circles, seen as a reckless fool. But Elon refused to quit. He believed too deeply in the mission. Tesla shipped the Roadster, proving an electric car could be not just functional, but desirable. It wasn't perfect. It was expensive, limited in production, and plagued with issues. But it was enough to show the world that electric cars had a future. From there, Tesla set its sights higher. Elon envisioned not just one car, but an entire lineup, a master plan. Start with a high-end sports car, then use the profits to build a more affordable luxury sedan, and eventually, a mass-market car that could reach millions. Step by step, Tesla followed that plan. The Roadster led to the Model S, a groundbreaking luxury sedan that redefined what a car could be. The Model S wasn't just electric. It was faster, sleeker, and smarter than most gasoline cars. It won awards. It turned skeptics into believers. But in those early days, Tesla was still fragile. The Model S launch was another massive gamble. Costs soared, deadlines slipped. Elon micromanaged every detail, down to the stitching of the seats and the design of the door handles. He demanded perfection, often at the expense of his team's sanity. Employees described working at Tesla as brutal, sleepless nights, impossible goals, relentless pressure. But they also described a sense of purpose. They weren't just building cars, they were trying to change the world. And slowly, Tesla began to stabilize. The Model S rolled out to acclaim. Customers raved about its performance and technology. Investors began to believe. The stock price climbed. By the early 2010s, Tesla had gone from the brink of death to becoming one of the most exciting companies in the world. Elon Musk, once mocked, was now hailed as a visionary. But the scars of 2008 never left him. He had stared into the abyss and barely crawled out. For Elon, the lesson was clear. Survival requires absolute commitment. He had risked everything: money, reputation, even sanity, and somehow he had pulled through. And yet, even as Tesla and SpaceX found their footing, Elon wasn't satisfied. He wasn't building companies just to survive. He was building them to transform entire industries. Cars were just the beginning. Energy, infrastructure, even the very way we power the world, Elon wanted to disrupt it all. And with Tesla and SpaceX finally standing, he was ready to take his ambitions even further. Chapter 6: Gigafactories, Solar City, and Scaling Tesla. By the early 2010s, Elon Musk had done what almost no one thought possible. He had kept both Tesla and SpaceX alive. But for Elon, survival was never the end goal. Survival was only the beginning. Tesla's Model S was a success. It proved that electric cars could be powerful, stylish, and desirable. But Elon knew that a single luxury car wasn't enough. If Tesla was going to achieve its mission, to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy, it had to build cars at a scale that could truly compete with gasoline. That meant building not just more cars, but also the infrastructure to power them. At the time, charging stations were rare. Driving an electric car outside a city meant living in constant fear of running out of power. So Tesla began building the supercharger network. Fast charging stations that could recharge a car in under an hour. It was a bold move. Traditional automakers had no such network. But Elon believed that without it, electric cars would never reach the mainstream. He also knew that batteries were the heart of the problem. Batteries determined how far an electric car could drive, how long it lasted, and how much it cost. And batteries were expensive. Too expensive. If Tesla couldn't drive those costs down, the dream of an affordable mass-market car would remain out of reach. So Elon proposed something radical: the Gigafactory. It wouldn't just be a factory. It would be the largest battery plant in the world, producing more lithium-ion cells than all the factories on Earth combined. By building at massive scale, Tesla could slash costs, secure supply chains, and control its own destiny. When Elon first announced the plan, critics scoffed. They called it reckless, impossible, even delusional. Building a factory that size would cost billions. The logistics were staggering, but Elon pressed forward. Tesla broke ground in Nevada, and soon the first Gigafactory began to rise in the desert. At the same time, Tesla's product line expanded. The Roadster had proven electric cars could be cool. The Model S showed they could be luxurious. Next came the Model X, a futuristic SUV with falcon wing doors and bleeding-edge technology. It was delayed, over budget, and incredibly complex. But when it launched, it turned heads everywhere. Still, Elon wasn't satisfied. He wanted something more affordable, something that could reach the mass market. That car would become the Model 3. The Model 3 was Tesla's make-or-break vehicle. It was priced for a much wider audience, aimed directly at the heart of the auto industry. Millions of people lined up with deposits before the first car was even built. It was a stunning vote of confidence. But delivering on that promise nearly broke Tesla again. Production problems mounted. Elon called it production hell. Robots malfunctioned. Assembly lines fell behind. Customers grew impatient. Investors panicked. At one point, Elon was sleeping on the factory floor, working day and night, trying to solve problems personally. He micromanaged every detail, sometimes to the frustration of his team, but always with relentless urgency. It was grueling. Tesla teetered on the edge of bankruptcy yet again. Elon admitted that he was just weeks away from collapse, but slowly, painfully, the company clawed its way out. Model 3 production ramped up, deliveries soared, revenue followed. Tesla had crossed a threshold. It was no longer just a niche luxury brand. It was a real contender, a company that could stand toe-to-toe with the giants of Detroit, Japan, and Germany. But Elon's vision was never just about cars. It was about energy itself. Back in 2006, Elon had quietly helped his cousins found a company called Solar City. The goal was simple: bring solar power to homes and businesses at scale. Solar City grew quickly, becoming one of the largest solar installers in the United States. But as time went on, Elon saw that solar and Tesla belonged together. Cars, batteries, and solar panels were all part of one ecosystem, sustainable energy. In 2016, Tesla acquired SolarCity in a controversial deal. Critics accused Elon of bailing out a struggling company run by his own family. Supporters saw it as the logical next step. Tesla would no longer be just a car maker. It would be an energy company. Tesla began producing not just cars, but home batteries, the Powerwall, and large-scale energy storage systems like the Powerpack and Megapack, capable of powering entire communities. In Australia, Tesla built one of the largest lithium-ion battery installations in the world, stabilizing a power grid plagued by blackouts. For Elon, these projects were proof of concept. A sustainable energy future wasn't just theory. It was happening right now with real products and real results. Meanwhile, the Gigafactory model began to spread. Tesla announced new factories in Shanghai, Berlin, and Texas, each one bigger, faster, more ambitious than the last. The world started to take notice. Other automakers, once dismissive, began launching electric programs of their own. Volkswagen, Ford, GM, one by one, they announced massive EV investments. What had once been ridiculed was now the future of the industry. And at the center of it all was Tesla, the company that had almost died a dozen times, now valued in the tens of billions, and eventually in the hundreds of billions. Elon Musk had done more than build cars. He had forced an entire global industry to change direction. But even as Tesla and SolarCity expanded, Elon's gaze was still fixed on the stars. SpaceX was moving beyond survival, preparing for missions that would push humanity further than ever before. And soon, Elon would try something that even governments had never managed to do: land a rocket and use it again. Chapter 7: SpaceX and the Era of Reusable Rockets. By the early 2010s, SpaceX had survived its near-death experience. The Falcon 1 had proven a private company could reach orbit, and NASA's contract had kept the lights on. But Elon Musk's ambitions were far bigger than a small rocket. He didn't want to just launch satellites. He wanted to revolutionize space travel itself. The next step was the Falcon 9, a larger, more powerful rocket designed to carry cargo to the International Space Station. Where the Falcon 1 was a scrappy proof of concept, the Falcon 9 was the real deal, a workhorse that could compete with government contractors. In 2010, the Falcon 9 launched successfully. For the first time, a privately funded rocket delivered a spacecraft into orbit and safely recovered it. In 2012, SpaceX's Dragon capsule docked with the International Space Station, making SpaceX the first private company in history to do so. This was more than a milestone. It was a signal that the age of private spaceflight had truly arrived. But Elon wasn't content with simply matching what NASA had done before. He wanted to leap ahead. For decades, rockets had been expendable. Each launch cost hundreds of millions of dollars, because after liftoff, the rocket was discarded into the ocean. Elon compared it to throwing away a 747 airplane after a single flight. He believed this was the core reason spaceflight was so expensive. So he set out to do what many thought was impossible: build rockets that could land and fly again. The concept sounded insane. A massive, multi-story cylinder dropping back through the atmosphere and landing upright on its own engines with pinpoint precision. Industry veterans shook their heads. They said it couldn't be done. But SpaceX started trying. The early tests were crude. Small prototypes with names like Grasshopper hovered in the Texas desert, learning to lift off, hover, and land again. Slowly, the technology advanced. Then came attempts to land real Falcon 9 boosters after orbital launches. At first, they failed. Rockets toppled over. Explosions lit up landing pads. Elon called it rapid unscheduled disassembly. Each failure cost millions, but also delivered data. And then in December 2015, history was made. A Falcon 9 first stage launched into space, separated, turned around, and landed safely back on Earth. Perfectly upright. For the first time in history, an orbital-class rocket had been reused. It was a moment that stunned the world. Engineers cheered. SpaceX employees wept. Elon Musk smiled, visibly emotional. This was the breakthrough that changed everything. Reusability slashed the cost of launches. Suddenly, access to space became cheaper, faster, and more routine. Competitors scrambled to catch up. SpaceX had just rewritten the rules of rocketry. The next challenge was to land rockets not just on solid ground, but on floating platforms in the ocean. Elon nicknamed them drone ships with cheeky names like "Of Course I Still Love You." After several fiery failures, SpaceX mastered that too. Boosters began landing at sea, opening the door to even more flexibility. From there, the pace accelerated. SpaceX launched more rockets, more satellites, more missions than any other private company in history. The Falcon 9 became the most reliable rocket on Earth, flying so frequently it began to feel routine. But Elon never saw routine as the goal. The goal was Mars. SpaceX unveiled plans for the Falcon Heavy, a rocket made of 3 Falcon 9 boosters strapped together. Capable of lifting massive payloads, it was one of the most powerful rockets since the Saturn V. In February 2018, the Falcon Heavy launched on its maiden flight. And what better payload than Elon's own cherry red Tesla Roadster, with a mannequin in a spacesuit, Starman, sitting at the wheel. Cameras beamed back surreal images of a car floating in space, with Earth in the background. It was part science, part spectacle, and pure Elon Musk. But the Falcon Heavy was only a stepping stone. The real prize was what Elon began calling Starship. Starship wasn't just another rocket. It was a fully reusable, massive spacecraft designed to carry people to the moon, to Mars, and beyond. Taller than the Statue of Liberty, built of gleaming stainless steel, it looked like something out of a science fiction movie. Elon described it as a generalized transport system for the solar system. In other words, the ship that might one day carry humanity to other worlds. As usual, the skeptics lined up. Starship was too big, too heavy, too ambitious. The prototypes looked like giant metal water towers, and many exploded during testing. But Elon brushed it off. Failure is the path to success, he reminded everyone. Each explosion was data. Each setback was progress. Meanwhile, SpaceX found another massive business, Starlink. By launching thousands of small satellites into orbit, SpaceX began building a global internet network designed to bring high-speed access to remote corners of the Earth. It was a project on a scale few had imagined, and it promised billions in revenue to fund even bigger dreams. By the late 2010s, SpaceX had gone from near bankruptcy to becoming the dominant force in global spaceflight. NASA relied on it, commercial satellite companies relied on it, even governments relied on it. But Elon's eyes remained fixed on Mars. Every launch, every landing, every experiment was, in his mind, one step closer to a multiplanetary species. And while SpaceX roared into the skies, Elon wasn't done with Earth. Back on the ground, he was dreaming up new companies, new technologies, and new ways to shake up entire industries. Some seemed practical, others seemed outrageous, but they all carried his trademark mix of ambition, risk, and the refusal to accept limits. Next came a brain-machine interface and a tunnel-digging venture. Chapter 8, Neuralink, the Boring Company, and Elon's Wild Side Ventures. By the late 2010s, Elon Musk was running 2 of the most daring companies on Earth, Tesla and SpaceX. Either one would have been more than enough for a lifetime. But for Elon, it wasn't enough. His restless mind kept turning to new problems, new frontiers, new challenges that seemed like science fiction. One of those frontiers was the human brain itself. Elon had long warned about the dangers of artificial intelligence. He worried that if machines became smarter than humans, we might find ourselves left behind, or even replaced. His solution was as bold as it was bizarre. Instead of competing with AI, we should merge with it. That idea became Neuralink, a company founded in 2016 with the mission of developing brain-computer interfaces. In simple terms, Neuralink aimed to build tiny devices that could be implanted in the brain, allowing people to connect directly with computers. At first, it sounded like pure science fiction, straight out of the Matrix. But Elon insisted it was both possible and necessary. He talked about a future where people could restore lost senses, cure paralysis, or even upload and download thoughts. The company demonstrated early prototypes in pigs and monkeys, showing brain signals being read and translated in real time. Elon went further, predicting that one day humans could type with their minds, communicate without speaking, and maybe even expand intelligence beyond biological limits. Critics called it reckless, even dangerous. Neuroscientists warned about the complexity of the brain, the ethical risks, the potential misuse. But as always, Elon pressed forward, convinced that someone had to try. While Neuralink chased the future of the mind, another company dug deep into the ground. It all started, as many Elon stories do, with frustration. Sitting in Los Angeles traffic one day, Elon tweeted, "Traffic is driving me nuts. I'm going to build a tunnel boring machine and just start digging." Most people assumed he was joking. He wasn't. That tweet became the Boring Company. Its mission, to reduce urban congestion by building networks of underground tunnels for cars, shuttles, and high-speed transport. Within months, Elon had built a tunnel under SpaceX's parking lot as a prototype. Later, he unveiled plans for a futuristic transit system called the Loop, sleek pods zipping through tunnels at high speed. Critics again rolled their eyes. Tunneling was expensive, slow, and already a well-established industry. But Elon argued he could dramatically cut costs by rethinking the technology. The Boring Company also became known for Elon's trademark mix of seriousness and humor. In 2018, he decided to raise money by selling flamethrowers. Yes, flamethrowers. 20,000 units sold out almost instantly, generating millions in revenue and countless headlines. Elon shrugged it off. It's just a fun thing. Between Neuralink's brain chips and the Boring Company's flamethrowers, Elon's side ventures added to his reputation as both visionary and eccentric. He wasn't just building cars and rockets. He was dabbling in things that sounded like comic book inventions. But behind the spectacle, there was a pattern. Each company, no matter how strange, was tied to Elon's core themes: humanity's survival, efficiency, and the future. Neuralink, a way to keep humans relevant in an age of AI. The Boring Company, a way to solve traffic and rethink urban transit. Even the flamethrowers? A way to fund tunneling while keeping the public engaged. And he wasn't stopping there. Elon kept floating other wild ideas. A hyperloop, a high-speed transportation system shooting pods through vacuum tubes at hundreds of miles per hour. A supersonic electric jet that could take off and land vertically. Colonies on Mars. Cities powered entirely by renewable energy. Some of these ideas were prototypes. Some were just concepts. Some may never happen. But the fact that Elon even put them on the table made him stand out. He wasn't just an entrepreneur. He was a provocateur, someone who constantly challenged the limits of what people thought possible. And while he was dreaming of tunnels and brain chips, his main companies were only growing stronger. Tesla was expanding across the globe. SpaceX was gearing up for even bigger milestones. For Elon Musk, the side projects weren't distractions. They were experiments. Ways of poking at the future, seeing what might stick, and keeping the world guessing about what he might do next. But soon, his attention would return to his core mission in space. SpaceX was about to attempt something no private company had ever done: carry astronauts into orbit. And the success or failure of that mission would mark one of the most defining moments of his life. Chapter 9: Crew Dragon, Starship, and the Race to Mars. By 2020, SpaceX had already done the unthinkable. They'd built rockets cheaper than anyone else, landed them upright like science fiction, and launched satellites by the thousands. But Elon Musk's ultimate test was still ahead. Could a private company safely carry astronauts into orbit? For decades, human spaceflight had been the domain of governments. NASA, Roscosmos, and the Chinese space program held the keys. Private companies could build parts, maybe even rockets, but the idea that a startup born out of near bankruptcy could put people into space was laughed off as fantasy. And yet, that was exactly what SpaceX set out to do with its Crew Dragon capsule. The mission was called Demo 2. Two NASA astronauts, Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, would ride atop a Falcon 9 from Cape Canaveral inside a spacecraft designed, built, and operated by Elon Musk's company. The world watched closely. For NASA, this was a leap of trust. For SpaceX, it was a moment years in the making. For Elon, it was personal. If anything went wrong, the consequences would be catastrophic. On May 30th, 2020, the Falcon 9 roared to life. The rocket rose into the sky, carrying two human beings on a private spacecraft for the first time in history. Minutes later, the first stage booster returned to land on a drone ship in the ocean, while Crew Dragon continued toward orbit. It was flawless. The next day, the capsule docked with the International Space Station, proving that private spaceflight had truly arrived. For Elon, it was vindication. Almost 20 years earlier, he had dreamed of building rockets to reach Mars. Now, he had just changed the course of space exploration itself. NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine called it a new era of human spaceflight. Millions watching around the world saw something more, proof that one man's impossible vision could reshape reality. But Elon wasn't finished. Crew Dragon was only the beginning. The next chapter was Starship. For Elon, Starship wasn't just a rocket. It was the vehicle that could make humanity multiplanetary. Built out of stainless steel, towering over 390 feet tall when stacked with its booster, Starship was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Fully reusable, capable of carrying 100 people, designed to land on the Moon, Mars, or even other planets. It was Elon's moonshot, literally and figuratively. The prototypes, built rapidly in Boca Chica, Texas, looked like retro sci-fi rockets. Locals called the area Starbase. The tests were dramatic, often spectacular. Rockets launched, hovered, belly flopped, and then exploded, over and over. Each fiery failure made headlines, but each one taught SpaceX something new. Then, slowly, they began to succeed. Landings became softer. Explosions became rare. And by the early 2020s, Starship was preparing for its first orbital flights. NASA took notice. In 2021, they awarded SpaceX a contract to build a version of Starship as the lunar lander for the Artemis program, the mission that would return astronauts to the Moon. For the first time, NASA wasn't just partnering with SpaceX for launches. They were trusting Elon's giant stainless steel dream to carry humans to another world. Starship, Elon said, was the ship that would one day build a city on Mars. And he wasn't joking. He talked openly about sending fleets of starships filled with supplies, habitats, and settlers. He envisioned terraforming Mars, creating a new branch of humanity on another planet. To many, it sounded like fantasy. To Elon, it was the logical next step. Of course, there were critics. Some called it dangerous. Others said it was a distraction from problems here on Earth. But Elon insisted life needed to be multiplanetary to survive. Whether it was an asteroid impact, nuclear war, or climate catastrophe, humanity couldn't afford to keep all its eggs in one basket. In the meantime, SpaceX kept pushing forward with Starlink, launching thousands of satellites to create a global internet constellation. Starlink brought high-speed internet to remote villages, war zones, and disaster areas. It became another revenue stream, and another demonstration of how Elon's space ambitions could reshape daily life on Earth. By the mid-2020s, SpaceX was launching rockets almost weekly, landing them so often it barely made the news anymore. What once looked like science fiction had become routine. But Elon never wanted to make the present comfortable. He wanted to drag humanity into the future. And for him, that future was Mars. The race was on. Starship wasn't just a project. It was Elon Musk's life's mission. Tesla had made him rich. SpaceX had made him powerful. But if he could plant humanity's flag on another world, that, more than anything else, would make him immortal in history. And so, as rockets roared in Texas, as astronauts rode in Crew Dragons, and as stainless steel giants waited for their turn to leap into the sky, Elon Musk's eyes stayed fixed on the red planet. Every decision, every risk, every sleepless night pointed toward that singular goal, making sure humanity had a future among the stars. Chapter 10. Tesla goes global. By the early 2020s, Tesla had gone from a fragile startup on the verge of bankruptcy to one of the most talked about car companies in the world. But Elon Musk wasn't satisfied. He didn't want Tesla to be a niche player. He wanted it to dominate, to become the driving force of the global auto industry. And the key to that dominance was scale. Making electric cars was no longer the challenge. The challenge was making enough of them, fast enough, and cheap enough to compete with the giants of Detroit, Germany, Japan, and China. The answer lay in gigafactories. Elon coined the term to describe massive manufacturing plants, so large and efficient they could pump out batteries, motors, and cars at unprecedented volume. The first major one was built in Nevada in partnership with Panasonic. It was designed to be one of the largest buildings in the world, covering over 5 million square feet. But Elon wasn't just building one. He wanted them everywhere. Tesla expanded to Shanghai, breaking ground on its first factory outside the United States. It was a bold move, especially because no foreign automaker had ever been allowed to fully own a car factory in China before. But somehow, Tesla got approval. The Shanghai Gigafactory was built in record time. Less than a year from start to finish, and soon, cars were rolling off the line. Next came Berlin, a gigafactory in the heart of Europe. And then Texas, a new headquarters and massive factory in Austin. Each factory was part of Elon's vision to bring Tesla closer to customers worldwide and to flood the market with millions of electric cars. Meanwhile, Tesla's product line was expanding. The Model Y, a compact SUV, quickly became one of Tesla's best-selling vehicles. It combined the performance and technology of the Model 3 with the practicality of a crossover. Families bought them. Young professionals bought them. Demand skyrocketed. Tesla also unveiled the Cybertruck, a radical-looking electric pickup with sharp, angular lines and a futuristic design that looked more like a spaceship than a truck. The reveal became legendary when Elon tried to demonstrate its unbreakable glass, and the window shattered on stage. The internet had a field day. But instead of hurting sales, it only boosted attention. Hundreds of thousands of pre-orders poured in. And then there was the Semi, a fully electric truck designed to take on freight hauling. If successful, it promised to disrupt not just passenger vehicles, but the entire logistics industry. Through it all, Tesla's stock price soared. Investors who once dismissed the company as a fad suddenly realized it was leading the entire industry. By 2020, Tesla became the most valuable car company in the world, worth more than Toyota, Volkswagen, GM, and Ford combined. The critics, of course, didn't disappear. Some argued the stock price was a bubble. Others questioned Elon's leadership, pointing to delays, quality issues, and his sometimes chaotic behavior on Twitter. But the market had spoken. Tesla wasn't just a car company. It was a technology company, an energy company, a symbol of the future. Tesla also pushed into energy storage with products like the Powerwall for homes, the Powerpack for businesses, and the massive Megapack systems used to stabilize electric grids. In Australia, Tesla built one of the largest battery installations in the world, helping solve blackouts and proving the potential of large-scale renewable storage. Elon's master plan was unfolding exactly as he had laid it out years before. Start with a sports car. Use the profits to build a luxury sedan. Use that to build a more affordable car. Expand into energy generation and storage. And remarkably, that plan was working. Tesla wasn't just selling cars, it was reshaping the auto industry. Major automakers scrambled to catch up, announcing electric vehicle programs of their own. Countries set deadlines to phase out gas-powered cars. Charging networks expanded worldwide. What once seemed impossible, a future dominated by electric vehicles, was now inevitable. And at the center of it all was Elon Musk, pushing relentlessly, often harshly, sometimes recklessly, but always forward. Tesla wasn't perfect. Production delays continued. Critics pointed to build quality and service issues. Some worried about whether Tesla could truly meet demand. But no one could deny the momentum. In less than 2 decades, Tesla had gone from a fragile startup to a global powerhouse. And its mission, to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy, was no longer a dream. It was happening. But even as Tesla conquered the road and SpaceX conquered the skies, Elon Musk's personal life and public persona became more complicated, more controversial, and more unpredictable. The world didn't just see him as a CEO anymore. They saw him as something else, part genius, part showman, part lightning rod for debate. And soon, his influence would stretch far beyond cars and rockets, into politics, culture, and even social media itself. Chapter 11, The Reckoning. 2021 to the present. By the time the calendar turned to the 2020s, Elon Musk was no longer just a businessman. He was a cultural figure, a political lightning rod, a symbol of the future. Depending on who you asked, he was either a visionary genius or a reckless billionaire. And in these years, from 2021 to the middle of the decade, his life became louder, more dramatic, and more complicated than ever before. Tesla had transformed from a scrappy underdog into the world's most valuable automaker. Factories rose on multiple continents. The Model 3 and Model Y spread across highways and cities, becoming familiar sights in places that once scoffed at electric cars. But with success came pressure. By 2021, Tesla was the crown jewel of Elon Musk's empire, but it was also the company most exposed to his public persona. Every word he tweeted, every gesture he made, seemed to ripple back into the company's value. At the same time, SpaceX pressed forward. Starship, the colossal rocket meant to take humanity to Mars, became the centerpiece of Elon's lifelong dream. Test launches filled the skies of Texas, Some ended in fireballs, others in triumph, but each one carried the sense that this was not just about rockets, this was about destiny. Starlink, SpaceX's satellite internet service, blanketed more and more of the planet, changing how people in remote regions connected with the world. But Elon Musk was never content with one battle at a time. In 2022, he shocked the world by buying Twitter, the social media platform he had long used as his personal megaphone. He rebranded it simply as X, declaring it would become an everything app, a fusion of social media, payments, entertainment, and artificial intelligence. The transition was chaotic. Layoffs, lawsuits, and furious debates filled headlines. For some, it was the bold reinvention of the internet. For others, it was reckless destruction. Elon, as always, leaned into the chaos, insisting that history would prove him right. Around the same time, he launched xAI, his own artificial intelligence company. Where others saw ChatGPT and other tools dominating the space, Elon saw a threat to humanity's future. He argued that AI must be developed safely, openly, and in competition with no single company controlling the future. xAI created its own chatbot, Grok, which integrated directly into X. Musk now had his own answer to Silicon Valley's most powerful new technology. Yet as the years passed, Elon's fortune became as volatile as his ventures. By late 2024, his net worth soared to nearly $500 billion, more than any individual in history. But within months, market shifts, Tesla's struggles, and political controversies carved away tens of billions. His wealth rose and fell on a scale most people could hardly comprehend. And controversy followed him everywhere. In Germany, his endorsement of far-right political figures sparked outrage. In the United States, his words and actions pushed him deeper into partisan divides. At times, his gestures at public events sparked global condemnation. He was not just building cars and rockets anymore. He was shaping political narratives, whether he intended to or not. Meanwhile, protests began to form under banners like Tesla Takedown. Activists targeted his companies, calling for divestment and pushing back against what they saw as unchecked power. Some campaigns grew aggressive, even targeting Tesla owners themselves. The tension between Elon Musk and his critics only deepened. Through it all, his personal life remained complicated and often deeply public. He confirmed the birth of more children, raising the number to 14. Relationships with multiple partners, custody battles, and allegations swirled in tabloids. Lawsuits, accusations, and family disputes painted a picture of a man whose private life was as turbulent as his public one. And yet, Musk's companies continued moving forward. Neuralink reached the point of human trials, placing its brain-computer interface directly into the hands, or rather, the minds of volunteers. The Boring Company expanded its tunnels in Las Vegas, showing flashes of a futuristic transport network. Tesla launched its long-promised robotaxi service in Austin, though regulators and investigators immediately circled after reports of early problems. Everywhere he turned, Elon Musk seemed to court both progress and controversy. He could unveil a rocket capable of carrying humanity to Mars, and in the same week, ignite a political firestorm with a single statement. He could announce the birth of a new child, and in the same month, find himself in court battling over another. By 2025, Elon Musk was no longer just the richest man alive. He was a force, unpredictable, volatile, and impossible to ignore. His vision stretched from underground tunnels to the skies of Mars, from cars on the road to chips in the human brain. Yet his reputation had grown more polarizing than ever. Some saw him as humanity's greatest hope, the man who might carry civilization into a new age. Others saw him as a reckless disruptor, wielding too much influence, leaving chaos in his wake. And so, the story of Elon Musk, at least up until now, ends not with resolution, but with tension. He has more wealth than nearly anyone in history, yet faces enormous risks. He has achieved more than many believed possible, yet is shadowed by controversy at every turn. One thing is certain, Elon Musk is not finished. Whether he leads humanity to Mars, reinvents artificial intelligence, or finds himself undone by his own actions, his story continues. For better or worse, he remains one of the most consequential figures of our age. And perhaps, as with all visionaries, the final judgment of his life will not come in his lifetime, but in the centuries that follow, when humanity looks back and asks, did Elon Musk help us reach for the stars? Or did he burn too brightly, too fast here on Earth? Epilogue. the man who would shape tomorrow. From the boy in Pretoria staring at the stars, to the billionaire in Texas building rockets taller than skyscrapers, the story of Elon Musk is one of extremes. Extreme ambition, extreme risk, extreme controversy. He has walked through fire, nearly losing everything, only to come back stronger. He has built companies that once seemed impossible, from Tesla to SpaceX, from Neuralink to Starlink. He has turned ideas into industries, and industries into movements. Along the way, he has broken rules, broken promises, and broken expectations, sometimes all at once. For some, he is a hero. The man who dared to drag humanity into the future, no matter how much it cost. For others, he is a cautionary tale, proof that one person should not hold so much power, so much wealth, and so much influence over the destiny of nations. But whether you admire him or despise him, one truth remains. Elon Musk has left a mark on history. A mark so deep that generations from now, people will still speak his name when they talk about the age of electric cars, reusable rockets, and the dawn of artificial intelligence. His story is not finished. It is still being written, one launch, one invention, one headline at a time. And like all great stories, it is filled with triumphs and failures, brilliance and flaws, victories and scars. Elon Musk set out to change the world, and in many ways, he already has. The question that remains is whether his greatest legacy will be the things he built or the world he left behind. And so, the story closes, at least for now, not with an ending, but with a pause. The kind of pause you hear before the next rocket takes off, before the countdown reaches zero, before the flames roar to life. Because with Elon Musk, there is always another chapter waiting just beyond the horizon.